it is Hailey, aka Hailey's Hobbies, and welcome back to my channel where I talk about my hobbies. Hello, hi. So, today's video is one of my least favorite to film. We are doing a book wrap-up, and so I will be sharing with you all the books that I have read in the past 2 months, so January and February. Last year in 2024, I did these like every 3 months, but I really picked up my reading in the latter half of the year, and it became quite a lot to talk about, like 20 books in a video, and I just really hated doing that. So this year we're gonna try doing it every other month, so wrapping up my thoughts over a 2-month span as opposed to a 3-month span. I have been in a bit of a reading slump, not gonna lie. January was a really great reading month, and then February kind of just like didn't do a whole lot. Yes, let's get into it. So the first book that I read this year actually was Emily Wilde's Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands by Heather Fawcett. This is book 2 in the Emily Wilde series. I love this series so much. I really loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. Emily Wilde is a like fairy naturalist. I think like the correct term is dryadologist. And so in the first book, she is wanting to create an encyclopedia of fairies because it hasn't really been done before. And so you're kind of set in like, is it like a Victorian kind of era? I don't think that's the Victorian period. 1900s, I think, is when this whole series is set. Yeah, this book starts off in 1909. This book starts off in 1910. I don't know when the third book starts off. It actually just came out. I don't know which period that is, but you're kind of set like in Cambridge, but then there's also fairies and like magic and stuff. And so in the first book, Emily is trying to create an encyclopedia of fairies. And so she's working on a specific chapter where there's not really a lot known about this like specific type of fairy. So she goes off into this like cold, like wintry country. I forgot what the name is called, and tries to figure out more about these fairies. And in the meantime, her co-worker from Cambridge, who she doesn't really like, his name is Wendell Bambleby, he ends up showing up to the town with her, and she's like, well, what are you doing here? And he's like, I'm helping you, of course. And so you get a lot with their like friendship and everything, and them trying to kind of uncover the secrets of these fae that they are looking into. And then there's also some things happening in the town that are kind of a little scary, and so now they're trying to also figure out what's going on with the town. So that's kind of where the first book kind of starts off and like what it deals with. The second book is kind of a continuation of things that happened in the first book, and you also get a bit more where they're again at a different town. Emily is trying to map the other lands, which is kind of like the fairy realm kind of world, and she's also trying to find some lost scholars. And of course you get Bambleby and Emily in this book as well. And yeah, I just really loved it. I think this is just such like a magical series, and I feel like Heather Fawcett does such a good job at making like the book so like atmospheric, and like you really feel like you're in the story, because just like her descriptions of things that happen are just so wonderful. I also really love some of the romance that happens in here. I love honestly the storylines. I'd say if there's any like weak part about these books is that I feel like the ending kind of gets resolved a bit too quickly. Maybe I was just reading this one too fast, but this one in particular felt like it just went by so quickly, but I did still really love it. And also I forgot what else I was gonna say. Oh yeah, I love that the depictions of fae in here are pretty true to folklore. I don't know much about folklore, but obviously when you read romantasy these days, a lot of the, you know, fae characters are like 6 foot tall with like wings. I could keep going on with descriptions, but you know, they're these big like hunky dudes, and Heather Fawcett kind of remains true to a lot of like folklore. You have like brownies, you have, that's the only type of fairy I can think of right now, but you have like all these different types of fae, and they're very, you know, cruel. They can't lie. Can they lie in this book? I actually don't know. You know, they like to twist their words, they like playing with humans and all this stuff, and so I just think that's so fun and kind of a breath of fresh air in such like a romantasy dominated kind of era that we are in. So yes, I'm aware that there's probably plenty of other books that do that as well, but this is like something that's mainstream that I feel like is a bit different than a lot of romantasy kind of books these days. I don't know if I'd really call this romantasy. Like, it is fantasy and there's a bit of romance, but I'd say it's more fantasy than romance. If any of y'all have read this, what would y'all consider this? Historical fiction, definitely. Like, historical fantasy, I feel like that's a really good descriptor, historical fantasy. So yes, anyway, I really love this book and I love this edition. Yes, I bought this edition even though I already have the original one. I will be donating the original one. I have a reading vlog going up after this video, I think, and I talk a bit more about why I bought this edition. So yes. So the second book that I read in January was A Fate of Wrath and Flame. I originally checked this out from the library a while ago because I thought it sounded interesting, and then I just never got around to it, but I saw it on the Kindle in my library that it was like available on the Kindle app or Libby app, and so I got it downloaded through my Kindle, and I really enjoyed this book. I had so much fun with it. So I have completely forgotten the character names, but you follow the female main character, and she kind of meets up with this like mysterious woman, and then all of a sudden she is kind of thrust into this new world where she is being accused of being like the princess who killed the king's parents. And so now she's in this world that she doesn't really like, she's not really sure what's going on, and there's these mysterious like people with like powers. She's now being accused of being someone that she really isn't, and so her and the king kind of have to work together to kind of figure out what's going on, because there's kind of like a different, there's also like an additional plot that's going on at the same time that you know is going throughout the story as additional plots do. And so the king kind of requires her and the princess to kind of keep up their ruse, because they were actually getting engaged before the princess killed the king and the queen. The previous king and the queen. They are having to like work together to figure out what is going on and kind of this big plot that's going on. I had a lot of fun with this. That's a very bad description. I would definitely recommend reading the blurb to kind of get a better idea. So this was just a lot of fun. I really loved the world building in this. I've become like kind of realized that as I read more and more romantasy, I really love when books kind of have a lot of world building to them and they're kind of a bit more slower paced. That's what I really enjoy when it comes to like romantasy. I will say there is like some romance in this book, quite a bit, and I just wish it was dragged out a bit more. I am kind of getting annoyed with like romantasy authors making like a big deal about like a romance and how it's like enemies to lovers, and then having the two kind of get together at the end of the first book and like be like ride or die together. It kind of annoys me because like I don't think that's enough development, like especially if you're pitching them as enemies to lovers. And so I feel like a lot of times the romance kind of falls short, and then eventually like throughout the series I end up liking it more because we do get like more of the character interactions. But I just wish that like romantasy authors would really drag out the romance a bit more, even at least to like the second book. Like that would be great. Thank you. I'm gonna be honest, I loved it, but I don't remember a lot of it. But I do think it was so fun, and I really liked the idea of the main character kind of waking up in this new world as like this person who's like in a lot of trouble. And so I love kind of getting to know about the world along with the character. I think it's a lot of fun, and now that I'm like thinking about it, I definitely do need to pick up like the next book in this series. And yeah, hopefully that was a good enough description. So then on to my next book. It's actually a novella. It's 6 Scorched Roses by, I think her name's Carissa Broadbent. It is the like first novella in the Crowns of Nyaxia series. So the first book is The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I read that last year in December. I really liked it. It's nothing like special or like revolutionary, but I had a good time. It was a fun read, and so I ended up reading the novella in January, and I had a lot of fun with this one. I was very surprised with how the author was able to create like such a good story within like 150 pages. Normally, I don't really like novellas because they aren't very good because there are only so many pages, but I felt like this one was just really good and like surprisingly well paced for such a short book, and I really feel like it could have like stood on its own as like its own book with like, you know, 300 pages if like some more stuff were sprinkled in there. I feel like we really just got like the bare bones of it, and it was still really good. And so again, I can't really remember the characters' names. Is it Lilith? I feel like it's Lilith for some reason, but the female main character is kind of in this town that has experienced a lot of hardship. A lot of people are sick. There's like this mysterious disease, and so she is trying to find a cure. And so she ends up going to like the town vampire, who is kind of like very reclusive, and she's like, if I give you like 6 roses, I want like 6 vials of your blood, because I think this will, you know, help cure my people. And for whatever reason, he agrees. And so you kind of get throughout the entire book their interactions as she's going back and forth, bringing him these roses and getting these vials of blood. And slowly but surely things become a bit more heated, and eventually, like at the end of the book, there's a lot of stuff happening. Like, it isn't just like, I don't know, just like a novella that's like, here's what they did at Christmas or something, you know? It's like, it's a full-fledged like book, but like in novella format. I was very surprised with how much I enjoyed it. I really liked the ending, and I'm really excited to see how these characters kind of play into the rest of the book. So I definitely need to pick up the second book. I forgot what it's called, but yeah, the first book kind of left off on a lot of like new information, and I'm not like too surprised about it, because I feel like that's like a trope that's commonly used in romantasy nowadays. Like at the end of the first book, there's this particular trope, and it's just like, okay, it was fun like the first few times, but now it's like very overdone. The next book I read was A Dangerous Collaboration by Deanna Raybourn. This is the 4th book in the Veronica Speedwell series. Y'all know I love this series. I've kind of been reading a book each month, although I did not read the 5th book last month, so maybe we'll get to it either this month or April, who knows. But if you don't know, Veronica Speedwell is a lepidopterist. She studies butterflies. And then you also have Stoker, who is like a taxidermist, and so they kind of get roped into solving mysteries together in sort of like this Victorian London kind of world, and I love it. It is so fun. It's definitely not, like, I definitely read it a lot more for the romance, because it is a slow burn done right. When I'm telling y'all, if you want a slow burn, read this series. It's so good. And I can't even imagine what it would have been like waiting like every year for the next book, because I obviously have been reading them kind of every single month. But oh my gosh, I think if I had to read like one every year and wait and wait and wait, I would be going nuts. So I just appreciate the author so much for really dragging it out. I really just love where everything kind of went in this 4th book. It was a very interesting mystery where like they went to an island actually with Stoker's brother, and there was a missing woman, and so they were just kind of working together to figure out what happened to her. And we get a lot of Stoker's brother's backstory, which was a lot of fun, because I think he's just a fun character. And yeah, I just really love how it went, and overall I'm just loving the series so much, and I can't wait to get to the 5th book. I forgot what the 5th book is called. I feel like it's like A Dangerous Relative or something. It's something with like a relative, I know, and I won't say like which relative because it kind of spoils the first book a little bit. So moving very quickly into Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. So this is the 3rd book in the Cruel Prince trilogy, or the Folk of the Air trilogy. And this was my first time reading the Folk of the Air trilogy, and I really did like it. The first book was kind of a letdown, I just think, because it's so overhyped. I wouldn't say it's overhyped, but it's definitely hyped quite a bit. And so I was kind of expecting like this epic story, and it honestly was really good, but it isn't like anything like crazy. I had a lot of problems kind of with the first book, but I really enjoyed the second book, and I read the 3rd book, and I did really like it. I felt like it kind of resolved really quickly, kind of the last couple events. But I'm thinking that maybe I just read it so quickly, because I think I read it in like 2 days actually. I think I read it for like a 24-hour reading vlog or something. If you don't know anything about the Folk of the Air trilogy, you follow Jude, who is a human. She was born in the human realm, but her older sister is actually Fae. So after like an unfortunate event, Jude and her twin sister, and then the older sister are back in the Fae realm being raised by fae individuals, or like their fae parents. And so Jude is trying to navigate this fae realm and like the cruelty of the realm. The fairies in this book are very kind of more true to folklore. They are very cruel, they can't lie, they, you know, really try and like twist their words to manipulate people. You know, they lie without lying, if that makes sense. And so I really loved that aspect of the book, and to see kind of Jude throughout the series just kind of go from like nothing to kind of being very powerful was really good. And I kind of really liked seeing kind of her descent into madness almost, and then trying to, you know, eventually save her, like, everything that she has worked for. So I really enjoyed it, and I did really like the conclusion, and honestly, yeah, I do really like the series. The last, like, physical, oh no, I have one more physical book, okay. I'm like trying to pull off all of the physical books that I have. Okay, so the second to last physical book that I read, because I have been reading my Kindle too much, is The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I have read this in like the past 2 reading vlogs I uploaded, I think, and y'all know my feelings about this. I wasn't really impressed. However, now that I look back at it, I do really like it, and so like I can't wait to like one day reread it and just kind of pick out things and maybe analyze it a bit more, because there is a lot with this story, especially with how it ended. There's so much that I definitely missed reading it. So if you don't know, The Idiot is about Prince Mishkin, who has epilepsy, and so he's been kind of getting treatment in Switzerland for a while, and eventually he comes back to Russian society, and he's kind of connecting with his relatives. In the loosest sense of the terms, he doesn't really know them, but they're very loosely related, and so you kind of see him being brought into Russian society and kind of seeing him juxtaposed to Russian society. Prince Mishkin is kind of like placed on a pedestal of being this very pure human versus like this very corrupt society. And so slowly throughout the book, you see how his character is impacted by Russian society. So there's a lot in this book that I definitely did not appreciate on the first go around. I didn't like any of the characters, and I just kind of hated what was happening with Prince Mishkin, but that's kind of the point of this book. And especially with how the ending goes, if you've read it, it kind of just broke my heart and really made me rethink the rest of the book. And I also like read through Spark Notes to make sure I wasn't you know, misinterpreting anything or just kind of like missing anything. And so like I understood the book perfectly fine. It's actually very easy to read, but I think there's so much that you can like analyze with it, and I don't typically read books to analyze them. I read them for a good time, and so as I was reading this, I was not having a good time, so that like greatly influenced my review. But now, especially because of the last chapter, I'm like, that was actually really good. And so one day, I think when I, you know, potentially reread this, I think it'll be a lot of fun to go back through it and really kind of think about what is happening and maybe kind of look at it with a more critical eye. Not that I have any desire to do that, but I do think it would be kind of fun to try and analyze a classic again, like I did in high school. Now I just read them for the vibes, so yeah. So the last book that I read in January was a book that I think put me into a reading slump. So this is How to Win Friends and Influence People. I read this as an audiobook. It finally came in on my Libby app. My brother got this for me a few Christmases ago, and I was like, you know what, I really should read this. He hasn't asked me about it, but I feel like one day he might, so it'll be good to say that I've read this, and I don't really like it. I just didn't really care for it. I'm not a self-help book girly. I knew going into it I just wasn't going to enjoy it, and I'm not surprised that I didn't like it. As the title suggests, it's kind of learning or teaching you how to win friends and influence people. There's this really good Goodreads review that I feel like sums it up really well, in that the message of this book kind of implies that you can't do anything for yourself and you kind of have to do everything for everyone else all the time. In order to, you know, make friends and kind of influence people, you need to do everything for someone else as opposed to something that you like want. There is a good point about like understanding like what people are going through and kind of putting yourself in their shoes and kind of maybe understanding why like they may be like resistant to a certain like idea or something. But other than that, like, I didn't really care for this book, and I think it put me into a reading slump. So moving on. Okay, so now we're on to February, and in February I only read Kindle books. I got Crescent City 3 from the library, and I read that in February, and I did really like that. I really love the Crescent City series. If you don't know, it's by Sarah J. Maas, and it follows Bryce as she kind of gets thrown into all these crazy plot lines in the book. There's sort of like an inciting incident in the first, like, I think it's like 50 pages or so that kind of really catapult the beginnings of the book. Sort of, there are a bunch of like murders that are happening as well, and so Bryce is kind of trying to figure out what's going on, and through this she kind of uncovers some really crazy things and gets swept up into this plot that is much bigger than she expected. And so I really love this series. I think it's so much fun. I love like the urban fantasy vibe and the combination of magic and technology. I will say the third book kind of got on my nerves a little bit. Like, I did still really love it, but Bryce just kind of did some stuff that were like out of character, I feel like. And I feel like she wasn't really like understanding kind of like her romantic partner's kind of POV. And then there's also this one big plot line. I won't really describe it because it's like a big like plot point sort of towards the end of the book, and so I won't really talk about it, but it just really annoyed me because I felt like it wasn't explained very well. I have a problem. There's this other book series that I like that kind of has the same almost plot line, and again, it's just not explained very well, and it feels like a cop-out a little bit. But I did really enjoy it. I don't know really how much more I can talk about it because it is like the final book in a series. And then last but not least, I read the Off-Campus series by Elle Kennedy. So this includes The Deal, The Mistake, The Score, and The Goal. So all of these books follows kind of a roommate in this one particular house. You have Garrett, Logan, Dean, and Tucker. I think Tucker and Logan both have the first name John, so Logan and Tucker are their last names, I think is how it goes. And then you have Dean and Garrett. And I really loved this series. I read The Deal because I felt like I had been reading a lot of fantasy and I just needed like a palate cleanser. And then I ended up really enjoying it. And I don't really like contemporary romance. Y'all know this if you've been here for a while. It's not really my jam. Like, I have like a little small section on my bookshelf and that's about it. I don't really tend to like them, but for whatever reason, I just was really enjoying the first book, and so I just decided to keep reading. I had the Kindle Unlimited trial run going, and I think that actually ended a few days ago, but I was able to read the whole series, thankfully. And so in the first book, you follow Garrett and Hannah. The second book is Logan and Grace. The third book is Dean and Allie, and the fourth book is Tucker and Sabrina. And all these boys play hockey, and the series really isn't about hockey. It's really about the relationships, and there's a lot of smut. I feel like it progressively gets smuttier, and then book 4 kind of dials it down a tad. So if that's not something you're interested in, I probably wouldn't recommend this series. But I really liked the backstories of a lot of the characters. I really related to a lot of them. And if you want like more of my specific thoughts, I would definitely recommend watching my reading vlog that will be coming out next week, where I kind of went through this whole series. I really enjoyed it, and I talk a bit more about my feelings about each book in particular, although I didn't read or finish reading The Score in that book, and I didn't even touch The Goal in that book. I guess like my definitive like ranking would be number 1, The Score, so that's Dean and Allie. Number 2, The Deal, Garrett and Hannah. Number 3, The Mistake, Logan and Grace. And then number 4, The Goal, Tucker and Sabrina. I was really sad about book 4, but there's a trope that I hate, and I was really upset that it was brought into the series. Don't like that kind of trope, and I feel like already going into it, I knew that I wasn't going to enjoy the book as much. I also felt like Tucker kind of kept saying like how much he like understood the female main character and like her backstory, and like knew exactly what she was like and like why she was doing things, and it's like, no you don't. You've known her for 2 seconds, you met her at a bar, and then you two hooked up, and like you haven't seen her since, and you know, like, I'm like, you don't know her, like, you've never interacted with her before this. If that was the case, then that would be one thing, but like, you literally have not talked to her. This is the first time you're staring at her. Like, you don't know her. I'd say that like Logan and Allie's story was also kind of my least favorite, but I still really enjoyed it, mainly because it didn't have the trope that the fourth book had. I really liked the second book. It just wasn't as fun for me because it's very insta attraction, or like insta like romance, insta love. A lot of the books, pretty much all the books, have like insta lust in them. The second book is kind of very insta lovey, and I don't really like that. I find it really stupid, and especially when contemporary romance books do it, I think it's really not done well. I don't find it like believable, and I just don't like it. So yeah, but the deal and the score are definitely the highlights of the series, and that's just not to say that the mistake is bad. Like, the mistake is still really good. I just don't like the whole insta attraction, I keep saying attraction, insta love kind of trope. And then the fourth book was definitely like leagues worse. I wouldn't say it's bad, but like, it isn't great, you know. It's like, it's okay. It's like how I feel about every other contemporary book that I don't really enjoy. Like, it's fine, but like, I'm not, you know, gonna be rereading it again. So yeah. Anyway, I think that's everything. I do realize that I went through these pretty quickly. I'm gonna be honest, I really don't like filming book wrap-ups because like, I remember what I read, but then like when I get to like talking about these books, I feel like everything that I remember just goes out the window, and I can't remember anything except for like vibes, and I feel like that's not very helpful if you kind of want to know what the books are about. So I do apologize about that. Yeah, I'm not the best booktuber, but I try. So anyway, I think that is everything. I'm hoping to kind of read a bit more. I'm kind of in a bit of a reading slump, and so I like dragged myself through February with reading, and so I'm kind of hoping that I kind of get back into reading this month. I'm actually on spring break now, so I have a couple books lined up that I'm really excited about that I'd like to read. And yeah, I don't know, I've just been really feeling really tired lately, and like I just want to like bed rot all the time, which is not good. So yeah, but we'll get back into it. I will be kind of vlogging my spring break reading because I hope to do a lot of it and hopefully not propel myself into another reading slump. I'm just trying to like take it easy with reading and just kind of keep reading what I want to read, if that makes sense. Like, I'm like actually reading another contemporary fiction book right now just because I just want those kind of vibes as opposed to like a fantasy. So yeah, maybe I'm in my contemporary romance era, who knows. But yes, anyway, let me know what you guys have read recently. Let me know if y'all have read anything that I've just read, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I love like chatting about books and everything. So yeah, anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!